Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Let's Taste with the Intrepid Wino. My name is James Scaresbrook, and this is part two of a three-part series looking at wines from Mitchell Winery of Clare Valley. Very, very important historical producer in the context of the Clare Valley, which, whilst it is probably the most important region for Riesling in Australia, also produces some of the most exciting red wines in the country, and probably the two most important red varieties are Shiraz and Cabernet Sauvignon, which is what we're looking at today, Cabernet Sauvignon. And I'm truly honoured that Helen Mitchell was generous enough to send me a sample not only of the current release of the Seven Hill Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a 2010 vintage, but also a wine from the cellar, the 2001 vintage. So the current release recommended retail is $28, and I'm excited to see sort of how they age. I mean, if its current release 2010 is still an incredible amount of time to be looking before bottling and releasing. So I'm very excited to have a look. 2010 generally was a very good vintage, so I'm excited to see what the Seven Hill Cabernet from Mitchell looks like. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Colour-wise, it is a very classic Cabernet colour, but it does show a little bit of age. It's not super intense black or purple in colour. You are starting to see the influence of age, perhaps even bottle age. It is moving slightly more into a brick sort of colour. Very classic varietal aromatics for Cabernet Sauvignon. Very much talking about blueberry, blackberry, blackcurrant even. So blood plum. Very dusty, earthy, and slightly stalky. There is a sort of a slightly mature green, herbal or capsicum character. Some people consider that to be an unripe character. I think it is a really important character in good ripe Cabernet, but not overripe Cabernet. If I don't see it, then my opinion is that the fruit's slightly overripe, or potentially the region is too warm for the variety. So I'm excited to see how this looks. Again, it's very typical, very textbook varietal example. Let's taste. Solid sound, quite soft. You see the tannins a little bit more on the front of the palate. To a certain extent, one thing that people say about Cabernet Sauvignon as a varietal wine, as in a wine that is the single variety of that wine, that Cabernet tends to have somewhat of a donut effect, as far as it's quite prominent on the front of the palate. It has good length, but there's not really much on the mid palate. And I think to a certain extent, this wine in its youth is suffering a little bit from that donut effect. It kind of, you get hit with a decent amount of fruit and tannin on the front of the palate, and then it sort of disappears and comes back again. There is some sweeter characters here, potentially some newer oak, maybe even some American oak. I'm probably wrong about that, but there is some sort of sweetness here. I think it's sitting in a really solid spot here. A 2010 vintage should be looking, like it's starting to be approachable now, and this is very much the case. I think with this wine, it's nice and soft and mellow. It's possible to me even maybe a little bit of something like Merlot in there. Sort things out. The alcohol is sticking out just a little bit with that wine, but not too overwhelming. For $28, very solid, and I'm interested to see what the 2001 vintage looks like now. One of the things that I'm noticing from looking at the back label is the 2010 vintage is 14.5% alcohol, whereas the 2001 vintage is 13.5% alcohol. So slightly different ripeness levels here. What is interesting, just looking at the wine straight off the bat, there doesn't really look like any difference between those two wines. So 9 years older, and the colour is almost identical. Yes, it is starting to show a bit more bottle age influence as far as it's starting to turn into that brick red colour, but the intensity, the clarity, and the colour itself is very, very similar to the 2010 vintage. So very interesting to know what the difference between those two vintages was, and whether or not there were many differences in the winemaking. So straight away, I'm noticing that the varietal characters are starting to fade a lot more. It is moving more into that more savoury, earthy, leathery, almost a salty jerky, beef jerky character. The fruits are starting to be more mature in character. They're sort of starting to look like dried red and purple fruits here. But yeah, we're definitely talking some more tertiary characters of bottle age. So I'm really excited to have a look at how this is on the palate. Let's taste. Very, very consistent between the aromatics and the palate. Much more complete. Whereas I was seeing a bit more of a bit of a donut effect with the 2010 vintage, that really isn't the case here with the 2001. It really does fill the palate. It's got incredible length here. The savoury characters are interesting, but they're not kind of overwhelming, and they're not aggressive. There is still some plushness of fruit. The tannins have softened out quite nicely. There's like a velvety character to this wine. If this wine is still available, I'm not sure if the museum release is available at the winery. Do get in contact with them, because I'm not sure what the price is, but this is a really, really outstanding wine. It is holding up exceptionally well. It's starting to show more interest and show the benefits of cellaring the wine. And I dare say that it's probably got maybe another 3 to 5 years of life left in it yet. But for a wine on release that's recommended retail, at least the current release is $28. That's a really, really exciting thing to see how well it can hold up at 9 years of age. I suppose compared to the 2010 vintage, like now we're looking at it's 17 years old. That is sitting in a fantastic spot. So absolute kudos to Mitchell. The 2001 is an absolute cracker. Highly recommend it. If you can find it, don't hesitate. Buy some. Crack it open, enjoy it with some people who may need a bit of convincing or be unfamiliar with the benefits of cellaring wine, particularly Australian wine. Thank you, of course, to Mitchell for very generously donating some bottles to the cause of Let's Taste. I'm always excited to have the opportunity to taste wines from Australia and New Zealand here on Let's Taste with the Intrepid Wino. If you'd like to see your wines profiled here, please do get in contact with me. You can find my details on my website, intrepidwino.com. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Please share it. Leave a comment below. And if you are on Facebook, please hit the like button for the page. If you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe for the channel. I'd love to hear from you and appreciate all the support. As I mentioned, visit me at intrepidwino.com. Not only are there ways of getting in contact with me, but there's also lots of different content that I've done in the past, including my podcast, The Vincast. And please do follow me on social media at intrepidwino on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. But guys, until next time, cheers.